Welcome, welcome, brother. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, sister. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. Happy rainy Thursday to you in the Rose Garden.
Hey, you know what? The sun is shining out here.
Oh, is it? Oh my goodness, it is not.
Yeah, it is, right? We in the same geography pretty much, but where you at, it must be rainy. I heard somebody earlier on a call and told me the same thing. And
Yes, it's
there's down.
rainy. It's rainy and gross and gloomy. And it's been like 2 to 3 days of it. I feel like I need my art.
Yeah, maybe it's gloomy everywhere where else, but right around my house it's sunshine here right now.
It must just be you. I think it's
No,
you.
the sun is shining through the clouds, right?
I think it's your energy. We all need a little bit of that for today. Well, I'm Sarita. I am the youngest part of this sibling duo, and this is my brother, Xadian. And we come together every Thursday at 2 p.m. to hang out in the Rose Garden, which is a special place that we created so that we could have a safe and healthy dialogue about all things current and to give homage to our wonderful grandmother who created these interesting beings that you see before you today. Brother, so much is going on in the world. And when I talked to you earlier, you said you were listening to Bloomberg News. So that must have been an experience.
Yeah, Bloomberg is I get this feeling of a pit to my stomach and aggravation and frustration as I listen to these different perspectives. But honestly, I appreciate the different perspectives. So don't get me wrong. Like I like hearing these different point of views, but it does frustrate me though, because I listen to stuff and I'm just like, I don't understand, the disconnect people have. Like, for example, they were talking about how, Trump is trying to facilitate peace between Russia and Ukraine.
Mhm.
Of course, Vladimir Putin is rejecting that because he's not ready for peace, obviously, right? He wants to accomplish what he set out to do. And, I don't know how Trump and them intend to affect that, but, they keep, putting that out there with this propaganda. And they always keep saying how terrible it is, bloodbath and this killing fields and these 5,000 so people that's dying every week and all this stuff. But then when it comes to Israel and Palestine, you talk about what's going on in Gaza and stuff. It's like the same types of things are happening, right?
Right.
But there's no stressing of, yeah, the need for peace between both sides and both sides having an agreement and all that. It's just heavily on the side of Israel, which I think is fundamentally something wrong with that psychologically. Like mentally, I can't wrap my brain around it. You know?
Yeah, it makes it hard when when you're a peace loving person, it makes it hard to be in an environment of so much I guess tragedy and turmoil. So, we have options. We do have choice. And remember, I've been reading this book called On Tyranny. I'll have to send it to you when I'm done. And it really does talk about the psychological impact of propaganda. And I think if we really dove a little deeper, we'd understand that all of our kind of more mainstream media outlets are involved in some kind of propaganda. And so we're going to have to learn how to be very discerning and then look at multiple sources when we're getting information.
Absolutely.
There's some real motivations for messages to be set up the way they are. But in addition to Bloomberg, I know you and I have both been watching a lot of information about mental health because May is mental health. So in addition to your birthday, which we are no longer Irish twins, but it is, we're going to celebrate you all month long. It is a month that a lot of people have been spending having real discussions about mental health. What I enjoy, like, it's kind of like Black History Month because, like, whenever there's like a focused month, there's always something out there where you get a lot of information about like one particular area of content. What I have been, what the internet, what that algorithm has been doing to me is it seems like it's really rooting a lot of Black creators, a lot of Black mental health people or people who work in mental health or are concerned about mental health, talking about Black mental health. But I almost feel like in some of these experiences, I'm having like this trauma bond kind of way, reaction where, it's this talking about the Black mental health experience as if it only involves trauma, right? And I think that that needs to be a corrected discourse because yes, there are Black and Indigenous people who have experienced trauma, and some Black people who, and maybe now even more so than ever, given what we were just talking about, the social political environment where we're having these real racialized traumatic kind of discussions is happening. But that's not the only message that I think that should be coming out in Mental Health Month. And I think it could be the algorithm. I don't know too much about it, but I've been reading a lot about how this algorithm kind of adjusts to your patterns and such. But I think if that's what if my feed is representative of what a lot of people are getting, and if you are a non mental health specialist, or even somebody who's doesn't have a lot of familiarity with like Black people or Black mental health, you would get the impression that all our Black mental health experiences is it's rooted in trauma, and maybe some people really do believe that. But I think that we can talk about mental health from a developmental lens, from the lens where we need to be accessing early intervention, especially in a month like May, outside of, you've had this worst experience happen, you hit rock bottom, you almost kill yourself, and then you access resources. So I think I'm wanting to talk about that today as both a mental health professional, but also somebody who lives with mental health in their family. So, there's mental health diagnoses that are in our family, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we handled it correctly or addressed it correctly. So a lot of this month could be centered around what to do about it, like, increasing access, increasing awareness, identifying the signs, instead of saying, like, this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. So I'm so ready to dive into that today.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I mean, honestly, when I hear what you're saying in terms of the trauma aspect that's trying to be connected to what they call like BIPOC people or whatnot, but I was thinking that the that life itself, the human experience, and not just human experience, but I think life itself is tragic. When you think about the cycle of birth to death, and then also all the things in between, it's a lot of traumas along the way. You know what I mean? Now, I want to ask this, right? Because trauma is associated with the extreme experience of something that has negative energy in it, right?
Mhm.
What is the opposite of trauma? What's the extreme experience of something that has joy and glee that's involved in it?
Well, let me just clarify too, from like my operational definition of trauma, because I think that there's a lot of people who've expanded it to fit certain aspects of functioning that are harmful. And I would call that more like stress and stress reactions. But trauma has been defined, and it's really your exposure to events where you've either witnessed death or darn near experienced death. And so if we look at it that way, what you described just a second ago is very meaningful. The human experience is a stress experience. Like birth is very stressful. I can sign me up, coach. Let me tell everybody about the stressful birth experience that I had with both of my children. But I would not say that I almost faced death when I had my children. Yet a lot of people talk about, like, birthing as a trauma. And there are some people, like, I do not want to mitigate the fact that there are going to be some people who've had, life threatening experiences in the delivery process. But it's not every experience. It should be a very small percentage of those experiences. And you can have extreme stress. Like, extreme stress can happen, like the separation of the hips that happen in childbirth.
But definitely the looming of the death shadow is on birth, right? Because birth itself is kind of like a miraculous event. It's no guarantee that it'll be a certain kind of outcome. You go into that birth situation and you're hoping for the best, but lots of things can happen. That's why, like, I guess the best scenario is for you to be in a place where medical professionals are, that if something is turning left, right?
We have access.
Oftentimes it does, that you be in a place where, they can escalate and they can help you. So, like, real in a very real sense, death shadow is looming over birth, right?
But death shadow is looming over every experience if we take it that way. Like, the
100%.
one of the part of the human condition is we want to control everything. And so really the biggest thing we're all trying to control is not to die. But if we look, like, we're all trying to, like, put your seatbelt on, don't drink and drive. All good things to do. And we're doing that so that we don't meet our ultimate demise. But a lot of things happen to most of us before we meet these ultimate situations. And so I think it's important to govern our language, so that we are able to identify what are stressors and what are, like there's degrees to stress, right? There's mild stress, good stress, bad stress, and then there's some extreme stress. But then the most ultimate experience needs to be trauma. Like when you're faced with the baby who may be born blue, okay, then you're at the trauma's front door and we can talk about that experience. But when your hips are separating, like mine did when I had my children, and it hurt very badly, and I was wailing like a buffoon, that does not mean that I was close to death. Now, perhaps in that time period, I was thinking, like, this is the closest thing to.
But what about the child though? Because like you're thinking about the mother's experience in it, right? But I think like definitely inside of the birth experience, there's a lot of precarious moments for the child, right? Like there's some I said the child's heart rate drops low. And the funny thing is that you don't have clear visibility into what's going on with the child at the time. That people making guesses like, why is the heartbeat dropping? Why
Mhm.
is this happening? Whatever, could be like the cord is tied around the baby's neck or something occurs. And a lot of issues to an individual occurred through that birth process.
Yes, I agree with that. And so, again, there's that a part of the miraculous nature of birth, but I also believe that the body's functionality is created to do is designed to do exactly what. So while maybe all man does not understand why perhaps our heart rate needs to get lower when the baby's in the or the baby's heart rate needs to get lower in the birth canal, I do believe that our creator, for the most part, since that is something that is shared perhaps throughout the birthing process with many people, that's a part of the creative process, in bringing life into this world. Very different, however, than what could be associated with the trauma that may be happening with birth and other things. So I just want to make sure we're using terms correctly because, having an argument with the boss is not work trauma.
No, I totally agree. Well, let me ask you this. What is the opposite of trauma though? So
Well,
like when trauma is something is extreme, in terms of the extreme negative, which is we talk about the association of death. But when something, because I think that there's a marker, like an imprint that happens on you whenever you touch the extreme parts of the spectrum, right?
I would agree with that.
And so if you touch, so whatever the opposite of trauma is, that also, has an impact on you. You know what I mean? And I think I would guess maybe
Maybe
on
looking
you
at it,
or something like that. You know what I mean? It's the same thing that people talk about when they when they use drugs or whatnot for the first time, like they get this first hit or something.
right?
They say that that first hit is the best hit, and then all the other times after that, they're chasing that feeling.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that first euphoric exposure imprints on them like a trauma does, but it's not really considered trauma though.
Perhaps I can't even I think that's a good example for those who are in that world. I think there may be, and I also think like we might not want to be searching for like the opposite of all terms, right? But what we can know is that the human experience exists on this continuum, and we have a wide range of emotional reactions and experiences that we're going to all experience. Some of those may be joy. Some people may get to enlightenment. Very few people do because of this kind of balance between their like their desire that they have carnally to what spiritually they hold. But what I can say is that mindset matters and how we approach situations and scenarios matter. So building certain faculties and principles around awareness of certain things is far more important than just labeling everything in these distinct categories. I say, for example, if you saw a child who could not walk by, let's just say, within this developmental course, then you should pay attention to that and look for resources that help develop the skill of walking that we know is functional for that age period. The same thing can be looked at as mental health in terms of mental health. When you have children who can't settle themselves down, has sleep disturbances, have difficulty regulating moods and behaviors, you see those kind of things early on. You may not necessarily have a word for it, but you do see those behavioral reactions, those behavior maladaptions, things that just don't fit into a category of norm, even if this is your very, very first child. Okay. And you can then use that information to say what resources are needed to promote this child's development. But if we wait for this ultimate thing to happen all the time, like the biggest thing, I don't know, like used to, a lot of, because I'm a mental health professional and I work with early, very young children. We see people as young as 3 in our office. I have 2 types of parents that I see. I have the parents who they done been on Dr. Google. They have identified everything and they want every, resource, every diagnosis possible to help the kid. Then I have those parents who are like, someone told me to come here. I don't believe anything that someone said. And I'm bringing you the kid here so you can prove me right, right? Like that ain't nothing wrong with my kid. Then I have some parents who are just like, help me understand what's appropriate and what's not. So like I get these kind of 3 groupings of families, and the families I like best are that third grouping, because really we're all figuring it out. I'm new to the case. Oftentimes my staff might be new to the case. We're figuring out what is the need, but bringing them there early enough and building an awareness of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate is so much more valuable than having diagnostic labels, perhaps, or having information that doesn't really match your child's scenario. I'll give you a wonderful example. I had a family I worked with many more years ago, maybe about 15 years ago. Their child came to us with diagnoses already, but what they were excited about sharing was this one particular diagnosis. They didn't want to share the other diagnoses. Now, but if any other trained eye in the room, clinician in the room could be like, yo, there's some far more than what you putting on the table. It's kind of like if you were deaf, right? And blind, and the person just came in and said, I got a blind person here and I need you to help them do things. If you don't give me the full story, then I'm only going to do things that work for your visual impairment and not your hearing impairment. But it won't take a clinician very long if a person's talking to the deaf and blind person and they're also not getting some kind of reaction. You're like, is the person just deaf? Because I think there's something else going on. And that's what it's like in these experiences where you think from this human condition, you controlling all the information, but a trained eye, a clinician that's worked with families or what, they will be able to figure that out and then add additional resources or other places where they need to seek support. There may not be, like, I'm not a one-stop shop all the time for everybody, and I think that's what's important.
But also, have you ever seen that movie, The Sixth Sense or Sixth Sense or something like that?
Is that the one with
Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis and the child was dead, right?
No, Bruce Willis was dead.
Bruce Willis, yes, 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 yes.
Bruce Willis was actually a mental health professional. And you know what I thought was really interesting about that movie? Because it really identified, the blind spots that we all have as human beings, no matter how, professional we are, right? He didn't know he was dead, right? He was helping this boy to address the problems that he had, which was people thought he was crazy because he saw dead people.
Right. Right.
But at the end of the day, I guess they got to the point where they both realized that, his gift of being able to see dead people was so he could help these dead people in some kind of a way.
Right.
How
Right.
he helped him was the realization on his own that he was dead.
Right.
Now
Right.
that was wild because it made me think about how as individuals, no matter how consciously aware we are, that we have blind spots on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking that, we talk right now, like the dynamic we have, I think it's definitely, and I think from our own perception and the perception from the outside world, the sibling connection or whatever, it appears, healthy. You feel me?
Right.
But I could wholeheartedly test, just starting from my own side that I know that as a sibling, I fall short, that I've disappointed my siblings and not just them, just everybody who's associated with me in some type of way had to face some disappointment from me at some point in time. So in this way, I can admit to the fact that I'm not perfect. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that I got issue. Now the thing is, some people want to hold you to identifying your imperfections so that they can know for sure that you know it. It's like,
Right. Right.
I had COVID and I was talking to, I thought it was the end, right? So I started sending messages like goodbye messages out, whatnot. And I sent that one to, my daughter, and she was telling me, you saying sorry for any way that you hurt me, but, you don't know how you hurt me or whatever, you know?
Right.
But that caught me on the chin. That was like like that I ain't see. And I'm like, well, what the hell way I hurt you? You need to tell me this or whatever, right? So now I'm
Right.
saying this to say to you that like it's not enough just to touch on the fact that there's imperfections, you know what I mean? But
I
I
hear you. I hear that. But let's see this. Two things. Don't deviate too far away from the fact that Black people, you did something really exceptional in that experience, in that dialogue, which was be reflective. But a part of being reflective is an awareness that a problem exists, right? Like you said, I wasn't always a great brother, right? Thank you for saying that. I think I'm a pretty good sister, but you can say you weren't a great brother. But and that comes with a sense of awareness. I think though Black people have real blind spots, and maybe other people too, but definitely in our community, because like I said, I've been watching even creators who are set up like this is their experience to talk about the Black mental health experience, and they're using it in this very like monolithic way, like it only happens with trauma. And I don't think that.
Black people, because I really do feel like too, like like we said, we touched on two areas in the world that's facing extreme trauma right now, which is like
Right.
Russia, Ukraine, and then also Israel and Palestine, right, in that area. Now these people ain't necessarily the Black people that we referring to or whatever, but they going through super extreme hardships and trauma. So I'm saying that this trauma situation is an experience that's part of the human experience. It's not associated with just a single group of people. But I will also say, like I like how you point out, like, well, you think you're a good sibling and all this stuff, and you think, you just overall like a good, whatever hat you,
Good.
uh,
Good.
you're good, you're near perfect, you're good. But I would say that's a blind spot, right? Because there's some ways that I could think of, personally, where I would say my siblings failed me. They wasn't there for me then during certain times, but other people that, are my family too, may have came there, like say like Wes, for example, like I say, like when I was facing some of my hardships, like life taught me some lessons. But one of the lessons was like, no matter how bad a situation, you know what it reminded me of? It was that story you said about you falling down the steps and Bruce came there and he sat next to you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So I started thinking about, and let's take that metaphorically and let's just say an experience where I fell down the steps. Nobody in my direct family came to sit next to me. You know,
Gotcha.
what I'm saying? Yeah. But as the universe will have it, like, you know, I did have that. You
You
know,
had somebody to sit
yeah,
next to.
somebody come sit next to me and all this stuff, but it didn't come from the place where you would think it would come from. So then I started thinking about, well, what, like to me, like I said, the word family, friend, love, all that stuff means something. You know.
Hmm.
So when somebody says, "Well, that's my brother, my sister," what's that supposed to indicate? You know what I mean? So long story short in all of this, I'm saying is that we all have blind spots, right? And the thing about it, like I like how you started this off where it's saying like the awareness of it, right? Because how could you ever fix it if you don't know what it is? You know?
Right.
So that's what my daughter was trying to get at when she was like, you saying sorry, but you don't know what ways you. So I said, okay, true. I don't know. Thank you
Right.
for bringing it up. Tell me now, what is it?
Right.
Now, when I get called a person through the carpet, that'd be like, explain to me where my shortcomings are. Crickets, big, like the big Bambi eye. Blink, blink, crickets. Tell me, what did I do? You know what I'm saying? Now people are grabbing their straws like, oh, that one time I'm supposed to pay this bill and you took it out of my account. What was wrong there?
Right. Right. Right.
But I say, okay, since that was a problem, we going to solution it. No more. I won't do it again. Right.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is, I feel like no one would ever be able to get nowhere if they can't be aware of their own things. Like Michael Jackson's song talking about you got to start with the man in the mirror, the person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I start seeing people's issues, what it does for me is it starts making me look at myself in the mirror and say, certain things. Like I said, hardships have brought me to my knees to the point to where I had to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like I have some experiences where I'm talking to another individual and we're exchanging our, like how you used to trade cards. I forget what they call them, garbage pail kid cards or whatever the hell that was when we was kids.
Right.
Yeah,
You're so old.
I know. I should.
Pokemon cards or so.
Yeah, we exchanged cards or whatever the hell that was. But it's like that. Like we exchanging hardships cards, right? Like, hey, I got an ace of spades of hardships. You know what I'm saying? What you got? Like, I got the big joker. Trump's your hardship or whatever. So this dude explaining some stuff to me about his family, and I mean, he definitely was coming from. It was really yeah, it was bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when he was explaining it to me, I heard it. And then he was like, "But I still love them," you know. And I just was like, "Well, is that something that someone told you that you need to love people that just telling you bad?" You know what I mean?
Right.
Just love them. Why? I couldn't grasp why he loved them. He kept just telling me like, "I love him because that's my dad. I love him because that's my mom." And I'm like, "But they don't want you. They're not a part of your life." I don't understand. Why do you love them just because of that?
Might that reaction have not just to kind of have you reflect a little bit on like why your experience has to be like a one for one experience, it sounds like you really look for this reciprocality. Might your response to the way he loved been the way you'd been conditioned in love? So
No, like if you look at it, what I'm trying to do is just trying to understand the way he's connecting it. So I wasn't even looking at it at myself. I'm like, I'm looking at your story completely, and I'm trying to say, while I'm watching this movie, help connect me to your logic framework. You know, if somebody really is shunning you away completely, you know, and how is it that you're connecting love to it? And also, if you don't know each other, like say right now, like if he never met his father, which he didn't,
mhm,
his father didn't want nothing to do with him from the gate. He never met him. The one time he tried to reach out to his father said, "Why are you calling me? I told your mother I don't want you."
mhm.
That was it, and that was the only interaction they both had each other with each other in their life. And he says, "I still love him because it's my father." And I'm saying, I don't understand that.
Well, that's my point is
Yeah.
that from the way you were framing
Mhm.
love and the emotionality to it was through a reciprocal thing. Like, so for example, as parents, we know that there's a lot of giving rather than receiving in that relationship.
Right.
So if we framed it only by love my children by how much they give me, the kids all over the world would have
Well,
not that.
let me ask you this then. So by the basis of what you're saying, so he loves a total stranger. It's a man that biologically created him, but he has absolutely zero experiences with. The man
Right,
never held him as a baby. He never heard his voice, never cried, nothing. When he came to the phone to say hello, he ain't even recognize a voice on the other end because they never spoken to each other.
right,
So now my question is, if he could have love for him, this total stranger, then why doesn't he love me though? Me being a stranger. Why doesn't that same person, the same dude, right? Why he just look at me and be like, "I just love you." Why? Because you're a human being. But that wasn't there.
right.
But he did have a connection of love to the role that this person's supposed to play in his life. So because that role is assigned to that person, now I got love for that person. Now, what if I was his daddy and he ain't know that, right? You know what I'm saying? But he just say, "I got love for my daddy, but your daddy is right here." I don't understand it because I could tell you that there's a time in my life that we could have walked past our father and I wouldn't know him and he would.
We wouldn't have been able to pick them out.
Yeah, so we could have literally fought on the street. Like he could have did something. We could have fought on the street and I would have known we was father and son. But then I would be saying in my mind, I love my father. I just beat my father ass real quick.
I guess the two things are coming out from this discussion that I think you should process. One, love as a condition is a choice. And I know people don't believe that, but it really is a choice. Like we wake up every day and choose to love things. And I think we need the freedom of doing that. Like it's not this mystical, like I'm waiting for the mystical, magical love to come and fall on me. It doesn't happen. So love as a kind of concept and a conceptual experience is a choice. So a person who's choosing to love in their own ways is what we all do. We choose to get angry. There's a real cognitive process that is engaged when an emotion happens.
Hmm.
Now, in these roles, so that's different than so that's the first part. I think love, we all need to have this acceptance that love as an emotion is a choice.
We aligned on that for sure.
But then when you talk about roles like families and friends, certain roles we don't get to pick. Like as much as I would have loved it, I wish I was upstairs and saying, "Listen, I want this person as a sister, this is as a brothers." I didn't get to do that. So we came together in this kind of carnal experience because something else, the creator, the universe created that for us. But then we were blessed with all these other peripheral people that were like siblings to us at one point. And it's interesting because we're joined today by Antoine, who was like very much a brother when we were growing up. So, hey, Twan, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Um, and, we shared these feelings, reactions, experiences, the pain, all of that together as siblings every day, right? Remember, Twan used to live with us.
No doubt.
So, that is something different. Those kind of relationships, those bringing together, like how you talk about Wes, how you talk about Kiko, Bunny, all those important roles of that people have played during different experiences of our lives. Those people played really meaningful roles for us, and then we were able to label them with the same feeling, like love, if that's what we wanted to, right? So we have love for Twan, we have love for all these other people. So that's still a choice. Even if Wes came into your life, you could have chose not to like him. And there are still some relationships that are like that, where there's a lot of people that hang around each other, but they're mostly in competition with each other. Jealousy is just the other side of love. A lot of deep admiration for somebody that you can't see in yourself.
But it
So
still explain the disconnect of, how is it that you could love a total stranger, right? Let's just say, for instance, right? I could imagine when we were young, right? When our father wasn't in our life and everything. I could imagine what he was like. I could have created a fantasy in my mind, right? And then I could have attached to that's my dad. And
right.
I could have created like a fantasy falsehood love on that, you know? Which is, but no matter what happens in our lives, the end result of that is our choice and our actions, that create.
The story we tell ourselves. So I'm glad that you just said
Yeah. So,
we told ourselves a story about that. So that young man that you were talking about probably told himself a story about what that person did. But again, that story doesn't have to be validated in fact. Like if we were telling the story about our dad, it would be really not factual based on what we learned later, right? The facts would be really skewed from what we had thought a parent would look like and be like. It really, the real description of that would have been much harder to love, let's say. Like I don't want to be in love with somebody who's a crackhead. Like that just wasn't like a story. That ain't romantic. But that's the story of our father's story. He might have been a funny crackhead and a functional, but the bottom line is that man had a functional addiction. And being in a functional addiction is problematic when you want to be a good parent. And so what our grandmother did was she protected us from that. So, and part of her protective framing, I think initially was not to talk about them. Then when she talked about him, she never made this fantasy creation of him, right? Like it was very fact driven. He's got problems, she was not very kind in her analysis of what was going on with him. And then when you add our own experiences on top of that, it would be hard, I think, from my perspective, love to hear your perspective on saying, like, I grew up in love with my dad and that I'm not making a choice. Like I'm very conscious about the choice I make, not to be like, oh, my dad was somebody I love, because it was hard to love something like that. And then our interactions were like they were.
well, to be full circle with everything, I would say like that experience with that dude was helpful to me, right? in a certain kind of a way. And the reason why I brought it up was because, when I was struggling to understand, and I still do, like I don't understand his frame of reference at all. Right.
Mhm.
But I listened to it and I accepted it face value as what it was. And as we exchanging cards on this experience and whatnot, and I'm telling him about my situation with my family at the time, whatever. And then, it wasn't anything, he didn't have any guidance or insight or knowledge or nothing like that
Mhm.
to give me. But on my own, when I started looking at things, I would say like, we definitely was a fragmented, dysfunctional, disconnected family, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and let's just take all the people out of it that we have no control over, like, our parents and then our grandparents or whatever. But let's just talk about us as siblings, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, we was dysfunctional to each other, you know?
Mhm.
And when I was looking at it, I said to myself, well, right now I'm in a victim stance and mindset because I'm looking at them and saying they not good they not good siblings to me. You know what I mean? But then when I flip the point of view and I say, well, in the ways that they not good siblings to me, how am I a good brother to them?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I had to honestly admit, I wasn't a good brother at that time because I was absent. I wasn't present. I wasn't there. So, like, again, a person like you can't be a good father or mother or anything if you're not around.
Not available. Yeah.
If you're not around. So, so in my realization of that, I was like, well, as much as they're not good family to me, which that is true, I'm also not good family to them.
Mhm.
So now I say, well, what does that do to me as a human being?
Mhm.
It said, well, if I don't want to have guilt, like even if I want to put it on a prideful, egoic perspective, I say, well, I want to have the pride of being able to point my finger at them and say that they got problems.
Right. Right.
I have to take the problems I have off.
Right.
Like, well, I'm gonna be a good brother to them, whether they're a good sister to me or not.
Right.
You know what I mean? So then uh that happened through that experience, right? That enlightenment because I was thinking like I've never been a transactional person, you know what I mean? But I'm a appreciative, grateful person, right? And I'm appreciative and grateful because I feel like we know things can happen, right? I don't know if you remember, but when we was kids, when we grew up in Colorado or whatever, well, we didn't grow up in Colorado, but we was born.
Nothing, very little about Colorado.
I remember a lot, but we there was a house we were in and it burned down. Our house was on fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All these things happen and you be thinking, well, you right now when you go to sleep at night and all that, you don't thinking, well, tonight our house could catch on fire.
Right.
And what does that mean? We ain't gonna have a place to live or none of our stuff. We got to start over and all that. That happened to us. You know what I mean? So all of this, so I feel like every stage of our life was like fraught with just chaos, crisis.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't consider it to be like you said, like if we ain't gonna be on some word games, wordplay stuff, and we calling things specifically as what it was. I didn't feel like it was trauma though. You know what I mean? But there
Right.
were things that would happen, like stuff burn into you. Like you're like, yeah, the energy of this place feels weird. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
say if you walk into a place where your parents have been fighting in there and you know how our mothers work, because she Tasmanian devil a place before, right? But if when you walk into the place in the aftermath of that, you're like, wow, the energy of what was going on in this place is
But that also comes with, like, kind of cosmic discernment, and I think it goes back to what we're saying that when you are developing awareness, you are paying attention internally and externally and trying to make meaning of it. But I wanna go back to something because I think you brought up a good description about being good while you're in relationship or reciprocality within relationship, and I think it's important to kind of point out, you had expectations of us and we had expectations of you, but everybody needs to think about their expectation in a developmental course. So one of the things that being the youngest and being able to observe all of you all the siblings that came into my life, the big brother Twan, all those people, I got to see y'all's mistakes being the youngest and I got to learn from them, right? And so, in learning from them from a developmental course, my initial way of being in those experiences was like, how does Sarita survive? Not does how does Sarita survive and then how does she help her siblings along? It was, let me look at their experiences, let me take from them the good parts of the survival. Like, if I go this way, that'll allow me to live longer in these things. If I go that way, the threat of death is more real, or whatever it is. So I think when you're in this developmental context, you're largely thinking about yourself, just like I was. I was taken from your experiences, and not never was I ever thinking about what it was like for the older siblings in my life. But from a developmental perspective, that was appropriate because I was trying to figure out how to live my own life. And then as I got older,
Pause right there though, right? Because see, like what I feel like you just did in that is this thing that I see. It drives me crazy because I feel like this is a feminine
what is this?
where they're saying like, admit that I got flaws, right? But it
Yeah.
can't because like I was developing and all this stuff. But I'm just saying you
No, no,
could.
no. That's not what I said. We got to debate this point. I did not say so, and this is for the people because I didn't say I had any flaws.
You said that I was selfish in this because, and
I
it's
was.
because
I
I'll say
was.
this like the expectation, right? There's basic fundamental expectations, right?
Yeah.
People who are connected together, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and as a community or family, whatever it is, right? Only base level expectation is that you got my back.
Okay, stop there. Stop there. Okay,
I'm
let
gonna
me ask you this question. I'm stopping you. I'm
say that.
stopping you.
I'm gonna
I'm
say that though, just so you understand what I mean by that.
go.
When I say you got my back,
Uh-huh.
if I give you my back, I turn my back to you. I don't expect that while you're behind my back, that you got a knife behind my back, you're ready to plunge that in my back. So I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt to know that if I turn my back, she definitely ain't gonna put no knife in my back.
Okay. So that means betrayal. I'm
That's not
defining.
betrayal. I'm just saying that you, as brothers and sisters or whatever, or people close to you, you just think in your mind. You give them the benefit of the doubt. Everybody get this blanket benefit of the doubt of, let's just say, you just believe they always gonna have my best interest at heart. So
Okay.
if I turn my back and they got a rock in their hand, they ain't gonna throw that rock at the back of my head.
Okay. Can we call that betrayal? I think there's a shared term because here's I'm gonna counter that for a second.
Yeah.
Because I lived my life looking up. You lived your life looking up and down. Okay. So, meaning you felt like you were taking care of me, and then you had other examples. I only had my vantage point developmentally was looking up. And here's how I saw that. Imagine being able to see all the experiences before they happen. Like, so I saw dating, I saw, getting kicked out of the house, getting smart, I saw every experience before they ever happened to me,
Right.
right? So
Right.
in that way, I was able to kind of gather a collection of experiences and then make decisions that were good for my level of survivability before I ever executed it. And I had a lot of like ability to weigh risks and all of that. So you all, because most of what you tried on was a lot of like a first time for the parents that were in our lives, the grandparents that are in our lives, the teachers that were in our lives. I mean, I never think about this. When every experience that I had developmentally, including schooling, I always had a path of other people that went before me. So that a lot of the assumptions that I had to carry were not necessarily true to who I was. So, in that developmental course, I am, of course, going to selfishly pick the solutions that I already know you all have tried on, they failed. So, I'm going to do a different avenue. That was what I was trying to say. Now, in terms of holding up each other and having each other's back, contextually, I would say I did that really, really well. I'm going to give you an example in the things that I could control. So, like, I ain't on no house, I ain't on no car. I'm the youngest of you, but I can assure you this: nobody talked about my brother and sister. Nobody talked about the brothers that were in our lives. Nobody was able to tell me nothing negative about them. I wasn't gonna let you get set up to be jumped. Like that was the experience that I could control as the one that was looking up.
So what I'm trying to say is that that fundamental thing, and maybe you're right that you shouldn't have no expectations of people, whatever, right? But if you take the expectations off, then everybody become like a stranger and you deal with them like that. But
No,
you
I didn't say that. You done rewrite my script. I think you should have expectations. They should be shared. You
all
gotta
right.
share.
So let's just say the shared expectation between family members of sibling.
Yeah.
Let's take family members off. Let's make it just be me and you, right?
Okay.
Between me and you know, that shared expectation is they gonna look out for my best interest. Like if it's not in my best interest, I know he ain't gonna, he ain't gonna do nothing to really like step on me or cross me or do anything like this. Now, when that happens, it's a betrayal, right?
Yes.
But the thought process is this ain't gonna happen because
Right.
because of the connection that me and this person has. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. I get it.
I would say though that like certain things they simple. You know what I mean? And I look back at like things like you said, like Bruce being sitting there at the bottom of the steps with you. You know what I mean? But I could, here it is, I'm playing Tasia with you, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna be like, when I fell down the steps, you ain't sit at the bottom of the steps with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also certain things, like I would say, when they happen when people don't see them, like they say, if a tree fall in the woods, does it make a sound? Shit,
Right. Right.
every sound it would make is if somebody's in there to hear it. You know what I
Right.
mean? But
Right.
hey, people standing up for you, doing this and that. And even with that, there are some times when, you got frustrations with a person. You probably still talking with somebody and be like, yeah, my brother did this, my sister did this, but I feel this way about them and all. And so we ain't always all the time, fulfilling the things for each other, and it's the truth. And we let each other down, you know.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I'm just as human beings in the human experience, this happens. You know what I mean?
Okay. I agree with that.
And,
I would agree with that.
and I don't think that it's because there's malicious things in a person's heart that you're looking at and you're like, I ain't gonna be there for him and shit like this or whatever. I just feel like, what happened is that we didn't really know how to be family with each other. And I knew
Agree. I would agree we were learning.
we were learning, but there's some people who actually get trained up in it. You know, they
Mhm.
get inculcated and taught like, that's your brother. That's just this what y'all supposed to do for each other. Like there's some. I was watching the Wayans, Damon Wayans. He was talking about his upbringing, and he said their parents were like, if one of y'all get in a fight, if somebody get in a fight with one of y'all, they fighting all of y'all.
Yeah.
All this stuff. So that's training them to react to certain situations in that way. Like we ain't really had that. We was figuring the things out for ourselves when we was doing some stuff. And I feel like for us all, we felt this feeling of betrayal from each other.
From each other.
Yeah. And we disappointed each other. We wasn't always there for each other in the moments of truth time when we actually really needed it.
Yeah.
So then I also would say that the impact like this thing has on you is also you have a choice on how you want to deal with that. You could look at it and be a victim and be like, well, they did all this thing to me, but I was perfect to them. You know what I mean? And then you can act off that, or you could just be, I guess you would say in touch with reality of it, right? Because it's the only way real healing can happen, right? Because if we don't know why, how we offending each other, we're gonna keep constantly repeating it.
It all the
Yeah.
time. What I think that's the lesson in what you're trying to say is that there's growth in all relational dynamics, and a part of that growth is the awareness and the acknowledgement that something needs to be different. Well, here's our time is so short in the rose garden. Here's some real truths that I think you need to know since we are trying to figure out who knows who best and who did what better. So I'm going to give you some questions. I know you hate these games I like to play.
What's wrong with it?
I got some games. So
Mhm.
it's very similar to the would you rather, but it's a therapeutic intervention that I do when I'm working with families who've been disconnected and they're being brought together. Like I have to understand the parents' capacity to get to know them and to be adequately attuned to their needs. So I have a list of 6 questions. You got to answer them. They're about me.
Mhm.
Okay. And if you get them right, I will say you are adequately attuned to me and you are getting your A in brothering. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's rock.
All right. What's my favorite color?
Pink
How you know what my favorite color is?
and green. Because we went through this already.
Okay, see, I'm gonna shoot you. I gave you an easy one. I gave you an easy one because
Right, right.
I need you to know me. Okay, what is my favorite food?
Oh, desserts? I don't know. I just imagined the universe just whispered it in my ear. I don't know how I knew that.
You are correct. I called it sweets, but we'll go with desserts. I think sweets is desserts are adequately
My grandma
couched.
called it right.
That's not right. Grandma would be saying, "Don't you eat that, you gonna get fat." So so yes, I am an enjoyer, a consumer of sweets. Why did I get my PhD?
Why did you get it?
Mhm.
I mean, it's according to what you told me, you said you wanted to be some sort of doctor, and you chose this one because it was, yeah, I guess you could say something that was more fit to your, to your personality. You ain't want to do that whole medical thing.
You be listening to me. I like you.
Not pay attention.
You be paying attention. What hand do I write with?
Right hand.
Where did I go to do my vow renewal? Look, you getting everything right. Okay. Who was my childhood best friend?
Well, what place? In Maryland?
Oh, if you know Virginia, say Virginia. Do you remember Virginia?
A white girl, I forget her name. Damn.
Or describe her. You remember her?
It's the only one description of her I recall is that she had went to the public bathroom somewhere and got some kind of rash on her or something. Remember that?
She
You
got
know,
ringworm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Who was that? What's her name?
Tiffany Keith.
That's it. Yeah.
Tiffany Keith. Yes. So you remembered her. Yeah. Tiffany Keith.
I told you I remember all the way to when I was in the cradle.
Those memories. All
Yeah.
right. What are the things that could hurt my feelings when I was a kid?
Anything. He was real.
No, no, there was one.
Your friends or you talk about anything out, you would cry. He was real sensitive. You ask our older sister, you tell her. All we have to do is make fun of your friends or other than you'll cry.
No, I didn't. There was one thing that really I was particularly sensitive about. What was it?
Anything, anything. You still are now. What is it? Dude? I don't know that.
My weight.
Man, you wasn't know. See, again, I feel like sometimes if you go back and look at the pictures of us at any given time in our lives, we were all always on the slender side.
Yeah, but you used to say things like,
Your sister, our father gave us the nicknames, right? So
mhm.
our older sister, Bebe, that came from our father. You was short round, that came from our father. You know what I'm saying? So he gave us all these nicknames of who we was at that time. But it wasn't really representative of like an actual attribute because you was always slender.
But you guys used to make comments so much about it. I really had a complex. Like you would say, "Don't eat out so much, you're gonna get fat." And you didn't even talk that much, but you would talk about snacks and stuff. You were mean.
I didn't, that's why I was thinking, because even with our grandmother, right? Sometimes when you describe her, like when you just said something that she said, it's interesting to hear you say it because my perception of our grandmother is she was really a super proper lady. Like when we met her family, like I guess you say her great nieces and nephews and stuff like that, they would be saying that we looked at Rose like she was from France or something. Like she talked like that, but she talked fancy like that,
You did. You did. I agree.
yeah, but she would be, even though she was that way, like, yeah, I would say uppity, sedity, bourgeois type thing, she still would curse you out, and she would beat your ass, right? And you just make your ass to the trees and that, and then she'd pick up the phone, and she'd be like, "Hello?" And you're like, "What?
It's
You hear that thing? What you just, you beat my ass in here and all this stuff. Don't be on that nice stuff and whatnot." And but her methods did work. I remember
it worked.
because like I remember, there was one time, this is something I did. I think crazy, right? But it was, how I was down in the bottom level of the house by myself, where everybody
Mhm.
else upstairs sleep. But she had like little lights in the house. I think to help, so I could find my way to the bathroom and all this stuff, since it was on the other side of the house from where I was sleeping at. But as a kid, when I would look out from underneath my blanket and stuff, and the lights were they cast the shadows and everything. I just like, "There's stuff out there. I don't know what's out there, but I'm scared to death to go to the bathroom," right? There was a plant in that room with me, and I thought the plant was a real plant. So I said, "Shit, Imma just go ahead and piss in the plant, because the plant it got soil in it or whatever." So, it's just like what I would do outside, and I didn't know that that was a fake plant. So grandma comes in there and, she smelled the room as pissy, right? So she go to investigate and find around, and she find that I pissed in the plant, right? I think she was mad as hell. She might put her hand in it as a but that would piss me off too. So what does she do? You know what she gonna do next, right? James, call everybody in there, right? And then, boy, that embarrass you to death.
No, poor.
You will never do it again.
Right.
Because just off the sheer embarrassment, like what you said, that emotion you get when she'd call everybody in here, it's like, look what he did. All this, and I was like, shit, no matter how scared I was after that,
Not do that again.
I so to the bathroom.
You know what? This is a good way to close it because emotions have a powerful impact, and that emotion of shame is a powerful one. It can be paralyzing, and it can make change how you make choices. I appreciate all your candor. You took me a little off of where I was thinking about going today, but it's okay because I do think that addressing like the relational aspects of sibling relationships is really important, and I always appreciate your reflection because again we live in our experiences based on how we're situated in the situation. So I'm very happy that you kind of share your experience. I'm also so happy that Antoine was able to join
Yeah,
us.
no doubt. Big up the Antoine microwave.
Right, and to be able to share, like, that we had a lot of extended family who supported us through our journey, and no matter what it looked like, it wasn't perfect, but it was certainly, to me, life-changing, life evolving, and we all had a major impact on each other, and I'm deeply appreciative. Like, I loved having all the older siblings. Y'all made sometimes it was I never ever felt alone, but like I said, the decisions you all made, like, even picking your boyfriends and girlfriends, like, I was like, "No, I'm not gonna do the same thing they did," even though, like, early on, I was making interesting choices. So, it was really good to be the younger part of that dynamic, and I appreciate all the
Yeah, no
support.
doubt, no doubt. Antoine was the first brother I had, what I mean? And then, could big up to him and Taj also. But
Oh, yeah.
it's 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 Native Hawaiian, Pacific Island, and Asian Heritage Month too. You know, so big up to Tage and Amir, for that partial heritage and whatever.
Yeah,
But
their baby forenames is probably isn't he teaching himself, Korean?
he ain't teaching himself. He learning it through school or
Through
whatnot.
school, yeah. So how's he doing with that?
He dropped it right now. It's funny because he want to go to Korea. So his Korean grandfather was like, he halfway can't speak English well, but he said he was able to muster these words out. He go, why you want to go to Korea so bad? Because you can't speak. Basically, what you gonna do over there when you can't speak it and you can't read? So it's like without having your mom there with you, you gonna be lost. You whatever.
Right.
So I thought the same because that do be being real. But I wanted to say we gonna have we got to schedule a guest that's gonna be joining us. But one of them is you know uh Hannity West and also Balaban Lex. They are father son pair, but they making history in terms of Filipino martial arts. So we're gonna bring them on so they could talk about their background and their story and all this stuff too. And
Oh,
also,
can't wait. And the Rose Garden is always special when we have guests, and it's always special when we have to come together. Y'all join us every Thursday at 2 p.m. We're gonna be here whether you are or not. Brother, I love you. You know you always take me internally and externally, and I love spending this time with you. And I'm gonna see you next week in the Rose Garden.
all right, indeed. See you next time.
See you, brother.
All right.